Hello friends. Welcome to the Ben 10 What Ifs. How are you all? So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Ben 10 awakened the flame Omnitrix and got Harem of Julie. Charmcaster and Looma. Also be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. Embers of Change. The alien's fist crashed through the concrete wall, where Ben Tennyson's head had been a millisecond earlier. Dust and debris showered the abandoned laboratory as Ben rolled into a defensive crouch, fingers hovering over the familiar green and black device strapped to his wrist. 25 years old now, Ben had long outgrown the impulsive transformations of his youth, analyzing the situation with practiced precision instead. "I'd really prefer we talk this out," Ben called, his voice carrying the easy confidence of someone who had faced down cosmic threats since childhood. "But if you insist on demolishing government property, I've got a boo. 15 different aliens who'd love to show you the exit." The hulking apoplexian, tiger-like alien with rippling muscles and a perpetual snarl, responded by tearing a metal table from its bolts and hurling it across the laboratory. "Talking is for weaklings. Vazra wants the relic, and Vazra will tear apart anyone who stands in his way." Ben sidestepped the projectile with practiced ease, mentally cataloging important details. The alien mercenary was after something specific in this abandoned plumber research facility. Given that most of the dangerous tech had been evacuated years ago, what ever remained must be particularly valuable, or dangerous. All right then. Ben's fingers found the familiar dial, twisting with precision born from years of experience. "Let me introduce you to an old friend. He's been working out." The flash of emerald light momentarily illuminated the darkened laboratory. Where Ben Tennyson had stood now towered the crystalline form of Diamond Head, faceted body gleaming in the dim emergency lighting. "Last chance before things get really uncomfortable," Diamond Head offered, voice deeper and resonating through his crystalline structure. The apoplexian responded with a roar, charging forward with extended claws. Diamond Head waited until the last possible moment before sidestepping, simultaneously forming his arm into a crystalline blade that caught the alien's momentum and redirected it into the wall. The impact shook the facility. 4 years at the Plumbers Academy, all that combat training, and they never teach you guys to just surrender peacefully, Diamond Head sighed, morphing both hands into crystalline restraints. "Would save everyone so much time." The apoplexian struggled to its feet, blood-red eyes narrowing. "Vazra does not surrender. Vazra has survived the fighting pits of Hather. Vazra has." "Vazra talks about himself in the third person way too much," Diamond Head interrupted, firing a barrage of crystal shards that pinned the alien's shadow to the wall with millimeter precision. "And Vazra is about to tell me exactly what he's looking for in a decommissioned plumber facility." The mercenary's expression shifted subtle. "Why?" A flicker of calculation replacing blind rage. Diamond Head recognized the look immediately and tensed his crystalline body. "Vazra is merely the distraction," the alien growled, a hint of satisfaction in his rumbling voice. The subtle vibration beneath Diamond Head's feet registered a moment before the floor exploded upward. A second apoplexian burst through the laboratory flooring, clutching a spherical container of pulsing crimson energy. The newcomer was sleeker, feminine, with specialized equipment strapped across her torso. "Humans. So predictable," she purred, her voice lacking the typical apoplexian rage. "Always watching the loud, angry one while the real work happens elsewhere." Diamond Head reacted instantly, sending a wave of crystal across the floor, but the female apoplexian had already activated a device on her wrist. The air around her shimmered with teleportation energy. "Kaiser sends his regards, Tennyson," she called, her form already dissolving into particles of light. "He said you'd be too distracted by the obvious threat to notice the real one." "After all these years, still the same." Her voice cut off as the teleportation completed, leaving Diamond Head facing the original attacker, who now wore a smug expression despite being partially immobilized. "Who's Kaiser?" Diamond Head demanded, closing the distance and lifting the apoplexian by his chest fur. "What was in that container?" The mercenary's laugh was guttural and satisfied. "The future. The past. The thing that will finally break the great Ben Tennyson." A flash of green light returned Ben to human form, his expression hardened by years of experience rather than the hot anger of his youth. "You know, I've heard that about 50 times over the last decade. Still waiting for it to happen." The Apoplexian's smile only widened. Watch the skies, Tennyson. It's already beginning. Before Ben could respond, the building's emergency system activated, red warning lights bathing the laboratory in crimson illumination. The facility's AI voice echoed through the damaged room, atmospheric anomaly detected. Dimensional breach protocol initiated. All personnel evacuate immediately. Ben's plumber badge vibrated against his hip, and he pulled it free while maintaining his hold on the mercenary. Grandpa Max's weathered face appeared on the small holographic display. Ben, where? Picking up massive energy fluctuations above your position, Max reported, his voice calm despite the concern evident in his eyes. Whatever they stole is causing some kind of reaction in the upper atmosphere. We need you up there, now. On it, Ben confirmed, glancing at his captive. What about our friend here? Containment team is 2 minutes out, Max assured him. Get moving. Ben nodded, already moving toward the laboratory's broken window. Going aerial. Sending coordinates. The Apoplexian called after him. You cannot stop what's coming, Tennyson. The flame will, whatever he alien intended to say was cut off as Ben leapt through the shattered window, his hand already activating the Omnitrix. The familiar green light enveloped him mid-fall, transforming his body into the sleek, moth-like form of Big Chill. Let's see what all the fuss is about, Big Chill murmured, spectral wings carrying him skyward toward the gathering storm clouds above Bellwood. The atmospheric sea disturbance was immediately visible, a swirling vortex of energy unlike anything Ben had encountered before. Unlike the familiar green of typical dimensional breaches, this anomaly pulsed with crimson and gold energy. Reminiscent of fire rippling across the sky, Big Chill's communicator crackled with static as he approached the disturbance. Ben, our readings are off the charts, Grandpa Max's voice struggled through the interference. This matches no known dimensional signature in the database. Proceed with extreme caution. When do I not? Big Chill responded dryly, maintaining his altitude below the swirling energy mass. Do you want the actual list, or just the greatest hits? A new voice cut through the channel, familiar, confident, with the slightest hint of amusement. Despite this situation, Big Chill felt an involuntary smile form. Julie, what are you doing on this channel? I was in the neighborhood, Julie Yamamoto replied. Actually, I was tracking suspicious activity around decommissioned plumber sites. Looks like I was a few minutes too late. Big Chill circled beneath the growing anomaly, assessing possible approaches. You're with the Diplomatic Security Division now, right? This seems a bit outside your jurisdiction. It started as protection for the Galvan ambassador, Julie explained, her voice growing more professional. He mentioned concerns about missing research materials. One thing led to another, and here I am, watching you flutter around a dimensional rift. It's not fluttering, it's tactical aerial assessment, Big Chill corrected, his breath creating ice crystals in the charged air. And speaking of assessment, this thing is growing faster than it should. The communication crackled as Grandpa Max cut back in. Ben, energy readings are becoming unstable. Whatever was stolen is accelerating the reaction. You need to. The rest of Max's warning was drowned out by a thunderous crack as the dimensional rift expanded dramatically, doubling in size within seconds. The swirling energy sent out a shockwave that caught Big Chill mid-flight, sending him tumbling through the air. Ben. Julie's voice carried genuine concern through the static. Regaining control, Big Chill stabilized himself and assessed the new situation. The rift had developed a distinct pattern, concentric rings of energy spiraling toward a central point that glowed with intense white light. I'm fine, he assured her, flying higher to get a better view. But whatever's happening is accelerating. I need to get closer. Negative, Max ordered through the communicator. Energy readings are approaching critical levels. Maintain distance until we understand what we're dealing with. Big Chill hesitated, decades of experience warring with ingrained instinct to act. If that thing keeps growing, the entire city could be at risk. I need to try cooling it down. Before Max could respond, the rift pulsed violently, sending another shockwave across the sky. Big Chill phased instinctively, allowing the energy to pass through his intangible form. As he returned to solidity, he noticed something emerging from the center of the rift, a small, concentrate sphere of energy plummeting toward the earth. Something's coming through, Big Chill called, immediately diving after the falling object. The sphere moved with impossible speed, leaving a trail of crimson particles in its wake. Big Chill pushed his transformation to its limits, icy wings propelling him faster than he'd flown in years. The object was heading directly toward the forest preserve, on Bellwood's outskirts. At least it would minimize civilian risk. I can't intercept before impact, Big Chill reported, watching as the energy sphere crashed into the forest below. The impact sent trees flying and earth erupting skyward, setting down at crash site. Landing at the edge of the newly formed crater, Big Chill surveyed the damage. What had appeared as a simple energy sphere from a distance was actually something far more complex. At the center of the smoking crater lay a device of unmistakable design, circular, with intricate patterns etched across its surface, and a familiar hourglass symbol at its center. No way, Big Chill breathed, the Omnitrix symbol on his chest beginning to pulse in response to the device's presence. Ben, what is it? Julie's voice came through the communicator. The familiar green flash returned Ben to human form as he cautiously approached the edge of the crater. It's an Omnitrix, but unlike any I've seen before. The device in the sea Raider was similar in basic design to his own Omnitrix, but where the familiar tool featured green and black coloration, this one pulsed with deep crimson and gold energy patterns. As Ben watched, tendrils of energy extended from the device, reaching upward like searching fingers. Do not approach the artifact, Max ordered through the communicator, all professional comm now. We're dispatching a containment team. That device could be extremely dangerous. Ben moved carefully down the slope of the crater, eyes fixed on the mysterious Omnitrix variant. It's reacting to mine, Grandpa. I think it's scanning it somehow. The energy tendrils from the crimson Omnitrix suddenly shot forward, covering the distance between it and Ben in an instant. Before he could react, the energy wrapped around his wrist, creating a direct connection between the two devices. Pain lanced through Ben's arm as his own Omnitrix began to pulse rapidly, green light flashing in response to the crimson energy. Something's happening, he managed through gritted teeth as both devices released a blinding flash of light. When the light faded, Ben found himself on his knees at the crater's center, the mysterious device now attached to his wrist where his original Omnitrix had been. The new device was slightly larger, its surface shifting between deep crimson and burnished gold, with the hourglass symbol glowing with inner fire. Ben, do you copy? Julie's voice sounded distant through the ringing in his ears. I'm here, he responded weakly, staring at the transformed device. But something's different. The Omnitrix, it's changed. As if responding to his words, the device pulsed once, projecting a small hologram above its surface. An unfamiliar alien face appeared, humanoid but WITH features suggesting ancient age and wisdom. Greetings, Wielder, the hologram spoke, its voice resonating with unexpected depth. If you are receiving this message, the cosmic convergence has begun. And the Flame Omnitrix has found its destined bearer. Flame Omnitrix, Ben repeated, slowly regaining his feet. This device contains transformative capabilities beyond your current understanding, the hologram continued. It was created for the time when the barriers between dimensions would weaken, threatening all existence. The Flame Omnitrix draws power from the primal forces that exist across all realities. The hologram flickered as the dimensional rift above pulsed again, sending another shockwave across the sky. Time is short. Learn to master the flame, or all worlds will fall to the convergence. With those ominous words, the hologram disappeared, leaving Ben staring at the transformed device on his wrist. The Flame Omnitrix, as the hologram had called it, seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. Ben, Max's voice came through his communicator, serious and measured. Return to headquarters immediately. Whatever that thing is, we need to study it under controlled conditions. Before Ben could respond, the Flame Omnitrix activated on its own, the selection dial rotating rapidly as if scanning through its database. The familiar silhouettes of his alien transformations appeared, but each now surrounded by a fiery aura. I don't think that's going to be an option, Grandpa, Ben replied, watching as the device continued its autonomous activity. Something G tells me this isn't going to be as simple as removing it. A shadow fell across the crater, and Ben looked up to see a sleek vehicle hovering at the rim. The side door slid open to reveal Julie Yamamoto. dressed in the specialized black and blue uniform of the Plumbers, Diplomatic Security Division. At 35, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had earned her position through merit rather than connections. Her athletic frame suggesting regular combat training. "Need a ride?" she called down, her expression mixing professional concern with personal worry that few besides Ben would recognize. "Or are you planning to stand in that crater admiring your new jewelry all day?" Despite the situation, Ben felt a smile tug at his lips. Some things never changed, including Julie's ability to cut through his moments of dramatic contemplation with practical reality. "Depends," he called back, making his way up the crater's slope. "Does your fancy diplomatic shuttle have decent air conditioning? The last plumber transport I was on felt like heat blast sauna." Julie's expression remained professional, but her eyes held the warmth of shared history. Full environmental controls, shock absorbers that actually work, and a coffee machine that doesn't produce toxic sludge. Perks of working with ambassadors instead of fugitive hunters. As Ben reached the edge of the crater, the dimensional rift above pulsed again, stronger than before. Both of them looked up as the swirling energy expanded further, now covering a significant portion of the sky above Bellwood. "That's getting worse," Julie observed, her hand moving instinctively to the specialized energy pistol at her hip. "Please tell me your new watch has something that can fix tears in reality." Ben studied the flame Omnitrix, which had settled into a steady pulsing glow. "I have no idea what this thing can do yet, but we should probably get moving before we find out the hard way." They boarded the shuttle, Julie immediately taking the pilot's seat while Ben strapped himself into the co-pilot position. The familiar routine felt strangely comforting despite the circumstances. They had flown countless missions together during their relationship years ago. "Plumber headquarters?" Julie asked, her hands moving across the controls with practiced efficiency. Ben glanced down at the flame Omnitrix, then up at the dimensional rift still expanding above them. "Actually, there's somewhere else we need to go first." Julie raised an eyebrow but didn't immediately question him. "Coordinates. The old observatory on Mount Bellwood." Ben replied, his expression growing serious. "There's someone there who might know more about dimensional rifts than the Plumbers' entire science division." Understanding dawned on Julie's face. "You can't be serious." After what happened last time. "She's changed," Ben said simply. "And right now, we need an expert in interdimensional magic more than we need plumber protocols." Julie held his gaze for a long moment before sighing and adjusting their course. "Your funeral, or possibly all of ours." The shuttle rose smoothly into the air, banking away from the dimensional rift toward the mountains that bordered Bellwood's eastern edge. As they flew, Ben studied the flame Omnitrix more carefully, noting the subtle differences from his original device. The interface seemed more responsive, almost anticipating his thoughts as he examined it. "So," Julie broke the silence, keeping her eyes on their flight path. "It's been 8 months since we last worked together." "That Koro's diplomatic incident." 9, Ben corrected automatically. "You were coordinating security for the Tetraman ambassador." Julie nodded, her expression prophase. Sional but with an undertone Ben recognized as her gathering information. "And now you're wearing a mysterious new Omnitrix that fell from a dimensional rift, and we're flying to consult with a former enemy sorceress." Just another Tuesday for Ben Tennyson. Ben smiled despite himself. More like a Thursday. Tuesdays are usually alien invasions, not dimensional anomalies. The attempt at humor fell flat as the flame Omnitrix pulsed suddenly, projecting a series of mathematical equations into the air between them. The holographic symbols rotated and rearranged themselves as if performing calculations. "That's new," Julie observed, glancing away from the controls momentarily. The equations condensed into a three-dimensional model of the dimensional rift, showing its expansion pattern and projecting its growth over time. According to the model, the rift would cover most of North America within 12 hours. "Definitely not standard Omnitrix behavior," Ben agreed, watching as the projection added additional data points. "It seems to be analyzing the rift independently." The projection disappeared as they approached Mount Bellwood, the old observatory coming into view. Once a functioning scientific facility, it had been abandoned decades ago when light pollution from the expanding city made astronomical observation difficult. Now the domed building stood in isolation, OSED by its sole occupant for very different kinds of study. Julie set the shuttle down in a small clearing beside the observatory. I still think this is a mistake, she said as she powered down the engines. She may have helped occasionally, but Charmcaster has never been reliable. Hope, Ben corrected gently. She goes by Hope now. And she's earned at least some trust after helping stop the Chronosapian invasion last year. Julie's expression remained skeptical, but she unstrapped herself and stood. Your call. But I'm keeping my weapon ready. They exited the shuttle together, approaching the observatory with caution born from experience rather than immediate fear. The building showed signs of magical modification. Runes carved into the foundation stones glowed faintly with purple energy. And the air around the dome shimmered with protective enchantments. Before they reached the entrance, the heavy doors swung open on their own. Standing in the doorway was a woman with streaky, silver-white hair and intense violet eyes. Hope Ledger, formerly known as Charmcaster, had changed significantly from the vengeful sorceress of their youth. Now in her early 30s, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had found their place in the world, though the hint of dangerous power still crackled around her fingertips. Tennyson, she greeted, her voice carrying the slight echo that accompanied powerful magic users. I was wondering when you'd show up. The dimensional disturbance has been screaming in my ears for the past hour. Her eyes flicked to Julie, narrowing slightly. Agent Yamamoto, still following him into trouble, I see. More like making sure he doesn't cause additional trouble, Julie replied evenly. Nice to see you're still living the hermit lifestyle. Hope's lips curved into a slight smile. I prefer magical researcher in voluntary isolation, but hermit works too. Her attention shifted to the device on Ben's wrist, and her EXPR. Eshin changed immediately to one of intense interest. That's new, and extremely powerful. Ben held up his arm, allowing her to see the flame Omnitrix more clearly. That's why we're here. It came through the rift. And I think it's connected to whatever's happening. Hope stepped aside, gesturing for them to enter. You'd better come in. The magical emanations from that device are setting off every detection spell I have. The interior of the observatory had been transformed from its scientific origins into something between a magical workshop and a scholarly study. Books of ancient lore shared space with modern computers, while magical artifacts were carefully catalogued alongside scientific instruments. The central area under the dome had been converted into a complex magical workstation, with a permanent circle of runes inlaid in the floor. The dimensional breach appeared approximately 90 minutes ago, Hope stated, moving to a floating display of magical energy that showed the rift's pattern. It doesn't match any known interdimensional portal type, not null void, not legerdemain, not even chronosapian temporal displacement. She turned to face Ben, gesturing to the flame Omnitrix. And now you show up wearing what appears to be an Omnitrix variant radiating primordial magical energy. I assume these events are connected. Ben nodded, recounting the encounter with the Apoplexians, the theft of the mysterious container, and the emergence of the flame Omnitrix from the rift. As he spoke, Hope listened intently, occasionally making notes in a journal that wrote by itself. The thief mentioned someone named Kaiser, Ben concluded. Does that name mean anything to you? Hope's expression darkened. Unfortunately, yes. Kaiser is a dimensional warlord, part sorcerer, part scientist. He was banished from Legerdemain centuries ago for attempting to merge magical realms by force. She moved to a bookshelf, retrieving an ancient tome bound in what appeared to be metallic cloth. According to the histories, he believed that by forcing dimensional convergence, he could harness the power released during the process. Convergence, Ben repeated, remembering the hologram's words. The message from the flame Omnitrix mentioned a cosmic convergence beginning. Hope leafed through the book, stopping at a page showing a familiar pattern, concentric circles of energy swirling toward a central point, nearly identical to the rift currently growing above Bellwood. The cosmic convergence is a theoretical event, she explained, her voice taking on a lecturer's tone. A point where the barriers between multiple dimensions grow thin enough to breach. Most magical scholars consider it a myth or, at best, something that might occur once every few million years. And yet there it is. Julie pointed out, gesturing toward the ceiling and the rift beyond. Growing bigger by the minute. Hope closed the book with a snap. This isn't natural. The converge. NCE can't just happen randomly. It would require immense energy focused specifically to weaken dimensional boundaries. Ben looked down at the flame Omnitrix. And this? The message said it was created for when the convergence began. Hope approached him, her hands glowing softly with magical energy. May I? At Ben's nod, she held her hands over the device, not quite touching it but sensing its energy patterns. Her eyes widened slightly, pupils dilating as she connected with the magic within. This is extraordinary, she whispered. The magical signature is unlike anything I've encountered. It's as if someone found a way to harness the fundamental forces that exist across all realities. She stepped back, blinking as she broke the magical connection. If I had to guess, I'd say T.'s Flame Omnitrix was created as a countermeasure to the convergence, a tool to repair dimensional breaches rather than exploit them. Which means someone stole that container to deliberately trigger the convergence, Julie concluded. Her tactical mind quickly assembling the pieces. And this Kaiser person is behind it. Before anyone could respond, the flame Omnitrix pulsed brightly, projecting another hologram, this time a detailed map of the local area with 5 points highlighted in glowing red. What is it showing? Julie asked, moving closer to examine the projection. Nexus points, Hope answered immediately. Her expertise evident. Locations where dimensional energy naturally concentrates. If someone were trying to accelerate a convergence event, these would be the places to do it, Ben finished, studying the map. And look, one of them is at the old plumber facility where the theft occurred. The hologram expanded, showing energy readings at each location. 4 of the 5 points showed growing disturbances, while the 5th, located deep within Bellwood's industrial district, pulsed with particular intensity. That one's reaching critical levels, Hope observed, pointing to the industrial district marker. If Kaiser is using these nexus points to force the convergence, that's likely where he's concentrating his efforts first. Julie was already moving toward the door. We need to get there immediately. If we can disrupt whatever device he's using. It won't be that simple, Hope interrupted, grabbing a leather satchel and quickly filling it with various magical components. Interfering with a dimensional manipulation already in progress could accelerate the process rather than stop it. So what do we do? Ben asked, his eyes still on the holographic map. Hope slung the satchel over her shoulder, determination evident in her posture. We analyze first, then act. The flame Omnitrix chose you for a reason, Tennyson. Between your experience, my magical knowledge, and Julie's tactical skills, we might have a chance to contain this. Julie raised an eyebrow at Hope's inclusion of her in the assessment but didn't comment on it. The shuttle can T is to the industrial district in under 5 minutes. Ben nodded, the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. As the hologram faded, the 3 of them moved toward the exit, an unlikely alliance formed by necessity and a shared history more complex than any of them would readily admit. The flight to Bellwood's industrial district was tense, each occupant of the shuttle lost in their own thoughts. Ben studied the flame Omnitrix, trying to access its transformation function without success. The device seemed to be operating on its own programming for now. Julie piloted with precise efficiency, her training evident in every controlled movement. Hope sat cross-legged in the rear compartment, eyes closed in magical meditation, occasionally murmuring words in languages that hadn't been spoken on Earth for millennia. As they approached the industrial zone, the effects of the dimensional disturbance became immediately apparent. Factory buildings warped and shifted, the IR structures bending in ways that defied physics. Workers fled the area in panicked groups, while emergency vehicles created a perimeter around the most affected blocks. Julie brought the shuttle WN on the roof of a warehouse at the edge of the distortion zone, giving them a clear view of the epicenter, an abandoned processing plant surrounded by a shimmer of crimson energy. That's definitely our target, Ben observed as they exited the shuttle. The energy signature matches what came through the rift. Hope raised her hands, violet magic flowing from her fingertips as she assessed the situation. The dimensional thinning is accelerating. Whatever device they're using is already at full power. Can you counter it? Julie asked, adjusting settings on her energy pistol. Not directly, Hope admitted, lowering her hands. But I might be able to create a containment barrier that would slow the process. Ben looked down at the flame Omnitrix, which had begun pulsing more rapidly as they neared the nexus point. I think this thing wants me to try something specific. As if responding to his words, the flame Omnitrix's interface shifted, displaying a transformation silhouette B.N. didn't recognize, humanoid but with distinct patterns of energy radiating from its form. I think it's offering a new transformation, Ben said, studying the unfamiliar silhouette. Something specifically designed for this situation. Hope moved closer, examining the display. The magical signature is changing. It's adapting to the immediate threat. Is it safe? Julie asked, the practical concern evident in her voice. Ben met her eyes with a hint of his old confidence. Only one way to find out. Before either woman could respond, Ben activated the transformation. The familiar green light was now tinged with crimson and gold as it enveloped his body. The transformation felt different, more intense, as if he were connecting to something far beyond his usual experiences. When the light faded, Ben had taken a form unlike any he had used before. His body appeared humanoid but composed of swirling energy patterns that shifted between deep crimson and bright gold. His eyes glowed with inner fire, and symbols resembling the mathematical equations from earlier flickered across his torso. Whoa, the transformed Ben spoke, his voice resonating with multiple harmonics. This is different. He could feel power coursing through this new form. Not the physical strength of forearms or the elemental control of heat blast, but something more fundamental. It was as if he could perk the very fabric of reality around him, seeing the threads that connected dimensions. Ben. Julie approached cautiously, her hand still near her weapon. Are you okay? The transformed Ben nodded, raising hands that trailed wisps of energy. I think so. I can see the dimensional distortions. Not just see them. I understand them. Hope's eyes widened with professional interest. The flame Omnitrix gave you a form that can directly interact with dimensional energy. Fascinating. I need a name for this one, Ben mused, examining his energy-composed body. How about Riftwalker? Julie rolled her eyes despite the tension. Still with the naming thing, even during dimensional crises. Ben, now Riftwalker, shrugged, the motion sending ripples of energy across his form. Tradition is important. His attention turned to the processing plant below, where the dimensional disturbance was strongest. With his new perceptions, he could see energy flowing into a device at the center of the building, a construct of both technology and magic pulsing with malevolent purpose. There's some kind of amplifier down there, Riftwalker reported. It's drawing power from the nexus point and redirecting it to strengthen the rift. Hope closed her eyes briefly, extending her magical senses. I can feel it too. Powerful magic, but corrupted. Definitely Kaiser's work. Can you shut it down? Julie asked, already scanning the building for entry points. Riftwalker considered the flowing energy patterns he could perceive. I think so. This form seems designed to manipulate dimensional energy. We'll need to get closer. Hope determined, already summoning a platform of magical energy beneath her feet. I can shield us from the worst effects of the dimensional distortion, but only at close range. Julie checked her weapon one final time. I'll cover you both. If Kaiser left guards, they'll be expecting interference. Riftwalker nodded, discovering that this form could levitate as energy flowed beneath his feet. Let's move quickly. According to what I'm seeing, we have maybe 20 minutes before this nexus point destabilizes completely. The three descended from the warehouse roof, Hope's magical shield protecting them from the worst of the reality distortions that warped the surrounding area. As they approached the processing plant, the effects intensified, metal twisted into impossible shapes. Concrete flowed like liquid, and occasional flashes revealed glimpses of other dimensions superimposed over their own. The barriers are already beginning to fail, Hope observed grimly, reinforcing her shield as they reached the main entrance. Whatever we're going to do needs to happen fast. The doors of the facility had been melted into abstract sculptures, allowing them easy access to the interior. Inside, the dimensional distortions were even more pronounced. Sections of the floor and ceiling had disappeared entirely, replaced by swirling voids that offered glimpses of alien landscapes. Riftwalker took the lead, his new form naturally resistant to the effects. The amplifier is in the central processing room. This way. They moved carefully through the warped building. Julie maintaining a vigilant watch for threats while Hope sustained the protective barrier around them. As they neared the central chamber, a familiar roar echoed through the distorted space. Sounds like our Apoplexian friends are still around, Julie noted, adjusting her grip on her energy pistol. Perfect, Riftwalker responded with a hint of Ben's usual confidence. I owe them a conversation about property theft. The central chamber came into view, a vast space dominated by industrial equipment now twisted into unrecognizable forms. At the center stood a device that pulsed with crimson energy, tendrils of power extending upward through a hole in the ceiling toward the dimensional rift above. The two Apoplexian mercenaries stood guard beside it, along with several humanoid figures wearing specialized environmental suits. That's the amplifier, Riftwalker confirmed, observing the energy flows with his enhanced perception. It's drawing power from the Nexus point beneath the facility and redirecting it to accelerate the convergence. Hope studied the device with both magical and practical assessment. The design is ingenious, part magical, part technological. Kaiser has improved his methods since his banishment. Can we destroy it? Julie asked, taking cover behind a warped piece of machinery. Hope shook her head. Not directly. The dimensional energy its channeling would release catastrophically if the device were simply destroyed. So we need to shut it down properly, Riftwalker concluded. I think this form can interact with the energy patterns, redirect them safely. Before they could formulate a complete plan, one of the environmental suited figures looked in their direction. Though the face was obscured by a protective mask, the body language suggested immediate recognition. Tennyson, a distorted voice called out, amplified through the suit's systems. Always interfering where you don't belong. The figure made a gesture, and both Apoplexians immediately turned toward the intruders, weapons raised. The male Apoplexian, Vazra, bared his teeth in recognition. The human who becomes aliens, he growled. Vazra will finish what he started. Riftwalker stepped forward, energy rippling across his form. I'm guessing you're working for Kaiser. Want to save yourselves some pain and surrender now? The suited figure laughed, the sound unnaturally modulated through the environmental system. Surrender. When we stand on the threshold of dimensional mastery. You don't even understand what's happening here, Tennyson. Then enlighten me, Riftwalker challenged, subtly motioning for Hope and Julie to move to flanking positions. What exactly does Kaiser gain from tearing reality apart? Power, the figure replied simply. When dimensions converge, the energy released is beyond comprehension. Kaiser has waited centuries for the proper alignment, the moment when all realities become accessible from a single point. While the figure spoke, Julie had silently positioned herself behind a different piece of equipment, her pistol trained on the Apoplexians. Hope remained partially visible, her hands weaving subtle patterns of magical energy in preparation. And the flame Omnitrix, Riftwalker pressed, keeping the attention focused on himself. What does that have to do with Kaiser's plan? The suited figure tilted their head, studying Riftwalker's transformed state with evident interest. So it found you after all. Interesting. The flame Omnitrix was created by those who opposed Kaiser's vision, fools who feared the power of convergence rather than embracing it. Those fools probably understood that destroying reality isn't a great long-term strategy, Riftwalker countered, feeling the energy of his form responding to the amplifier's presence. Even if Kaiser harnesses the convergence energy, what's left to rule afterward? Not destruction, transformation, the figure corrected. A new reality, forged from the best elements of all dimensions, with those who control the convergence as its architects. The figure raised a hand, and the amplifier's pulsing intensified. Enough talk. The process has already progressed too far to stop. Eliminate them. At the command, both Apoplexians charged forward while the other suited figures activated energy weapons. Julie immediately opened fire, her precise shots forcing the Apoplexians to take cover. Hope completed her spell, sending bolts of violet energy toward the suited figures and creating chaos in their ranks. Riftwalker seized the opportunity, moving directly toward the amplifier. As he approached, the energy tendrils from the device reacted to his presence, reaching toward him as if recognizing something familiar. Hope, he called out, I need a containment barrier around the amplifier. Julie, keep them busy for 30 seconds. On it, Julie confirmed, laying down a precise pattern of suppressing fire that kept the mercenaries pinned down. Hope moved to a position where she could see the amplifier clearly, her hands tracing complex patterns in the air. Containment spell charging. Need 15 seconds. The female apoplexian broke from cover, moving with surprising speed toward Riftwalker. The device must not be disturbed, she snarled, extending specialized energy claws. Riftwalker turned to face her, instinctively raising his hands. To his surprise, his new form responded by projecting a wave of dimensional energy that distorted the space between them. The apoplexian's charge slowed dramatically as she struggled against what appeared to be thickened reality. That's useful, Riftwalker observed, before focusing his attention back on the amplifier. Reaching the device, he placed his energy-composed hands on its surface. Immediately, he could sense the complex patterns of power flowing through it, the nexus energy being drawn up from below, the manipulation matrix redirecting it, and the output channeling toward the rift above. I can see how it works, he called to the others. It's drawing power from the nexus point and amplifying it through a dimensional resonance chamber. Hope's containment barrier shimmered into existence around Riftwalker and the amplifier, creating a dome of violet energy that deflected weapons fire from the suited figures. Barrier established. Whatever you're going to do it fast. I can't hold this against concentrated fire for long. Julie had taken a defensive position near Hope, providing covering fire. Make it quick, Ben. They're calling for reinforcements. Within the barrier, Riftwalker focused on the amplifier's energy patterns. His transformed consciousness could comprehend the complex dimensional mathematics behind the device's function. More importantly, he could see how to reverse it. I think I can invert the flow, he told the others, his hands beginning to glow more intensely as they interfaced with the amplifier. Instead of pushing energy into the rift, I can make it draw energy back, collapsing this section. The lead-suited figure slammed against Hope's barrier, voice distorted by rage. Stop. You'll destroy years of preparation. Riftwalker ignored the protest, focusing entirely on manipulating the energy flows within the amplifier. The flame Omnitrix on his chest pulsed in rhythm with his efforts, seemingly guiding his actions. Almost. Got it, he grunted, feeling resistance as the device fought against the reprogramming. With a final surge of effort, Riftwalker reversed the energy flow. The amplifier's crimson glow shifted to gold, and the tendrils of power began pulling inward rather than extending outward. Above them, the section of dimensional rift connected to this nexus point began to contract. Energy spiraling back toward the amplifier. It's working, Hope exclaimed, maintaining the barrier despite the increasingly desperate attacks from outside. The suited figures retreated the barrier as the amplifier began to vibrate violently, recognizing the danger. The lead figure pointed at Riftwalker through the barrier, voice coldly furious despite the modulation. This changes nothing, Tennyson. There are 4 other nexus points already activated. The convergence has begun, and Kaiser will not be denied his destiny. With those words, the suited figures activated teleportation devices, disappearing in flashes of crimson light. The apoplexians, seeing their employers retreat, quickly followed suit, leaving the 3 heroes alone with the rapidly destabilizing amplifier. We need to get out of here, Julie warned, already moving toward the exit. That thing's going critical. Hope dropped the barrier, summoning her transportation disk. The dimensional collapse will be contained to this facility. But the shockwave could still be dangerous. Riftwalker nodded, pulling his hands away from the amplifier as the reversal process became self-sustaining. The 3 of them retreated rapidly, making their way through the warping facility as reality began to restabilize around them. They had barely cleared the building when a column of golden light erupted from the center of the facility, shooting upward to connect with the dimensional rift. Where the rift had been expanding before, now this section was visibly contracting, the fiery energy spiraling inward like water down a drain. From the safety of Julie's shuttle, they watched as the dimensional distortions around the industrial district began to fade. The section of rift connected to this nexus point collapsed entirely, leaving a smaller, though still massive, tear in reality above Bellwood. A flash of crimson light returned Ben to human form, the flame Omnitrix on his wrist pulsing once before settling into a steady, subdued glow. He looked exhausted but satisfied as he studied the device. 1 down, 4 to go, he observed, leaning back in his seat. At least now we know what we're dealing with. Hope was already consulting her magical texts, cross-referencing information about the remaining nexus points. According to the holographic map, the next nearest point is at the old mining complex outside town. Julie set course for Plumber headquarters, her expression professionally neutral despite the tension of the past hour. We should report in first, get reinforcements. If all 5 nexus points are being activated simultaneously, we can't handle this alone. Ben nodded in agreement, feeling the weight of responsibility. You're right, we need to coordinate a proper response. Kaiser's people will be expecting us at the other sites now. As they flew toward headquarters, Ben couldn't help noticing the new dynamic between the 3 of them, Julie's tactical precision complementing Hope's magical expertise. With his own adaptability binding them together as an effective team. Despite the circumstances, it felt right somehow, as if the crisis had brought together the exact combination of skills needed to face it. The flame Omnitrix pulsed gently on his wrist, seemingly in agreement with his unspoken assessment. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, an unlick Ely alliance formed by necessity but strengthened by something more complex than any of them were ready to acknowledge. In the dimming light of evening, as the partial dimensional rift cast an otherworldly glow across Bellwood, Ben Tennyson looked from the woman who had once been his greatest love to the woman who had once been his dedicated enemy, and felt a strange certainty that the flame Omnitrix had brought them together for reasons extending far beyond the immediate crisis. The shuttle banked toward Plumber headquarters, flying into the gathering darkness as the first battle in a much larger war came to its conclusion. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Sparks of Reunion. Plumber headquarters hummed with urgent activity. Emergency protocols had transformed the typically orderly facility into a hive of coordinated chaos. Technicians analyzed dimensional readings, field agents prepared response teams, and senior officers huddled around holographic displays showing the remaining tiers in reality above Bellwood. Within this storm of preparation, an island of intense focus formed around Laboratory 7, where the most puzzling element of the crisis was under examination. Absolutely fascinating, Dryba muttered, adjusting the scanner hovering above Ben's wrist. The diminutive Galvan scientist's oversized eyes blinked rapidly behind specialized goggles as data streamed across his display. The quantum signature is unlike anything in our database. His partner Blukik, equally small but perpetually unimpressed, tapped notes into a datapad. Seems pretty standard to me. Just another fancy watch that could destroy the universe. Ben resisted the urge to move his arm, maintaining the precisely calibrated position required for the scan. After 3 hours of continuous examination, his patience had worn considerably thinner than the scientists realized. Any chance we could speed this up? He asked, glancing toward the lab's entrance where Julie stood in conversation with Magister Tennyson. We've got 4 more nexus points to shut down before Kaiser completes whatever he's planning. Dryba huffed indignantly. Speed up cutting-edge interdimensional analysis. Why don't we just guess instead? Perhaps flip a coin to determine whether this device will save reality or accelerate its destruction. That would be faster, Blukik deadpanned. A subtle cough from the doorway drew their attention. Grandpa Max stood there, his weathered face set in the expression Ben recognized as his command decision look. Despite being well into his 70s, Max Tennyson remained an imposing figure, his experienced eyes missing nothing, his posture military straight despite decades of alien encounters that would have broken lesser men. What have we learned? Max asked, moving in to the lab with Julie following close behind. Dryba brightened immediately, always eager to share findings with a respectful audience. The device appears to be a legitimate variant of the Omnitrix, but with modifications that allow it to interact directly with the fundamental forces that separate dimensions. In English, Julie prompted, her diplomatic security training evident in her professional stance, alert but not tense. Ready but not anxious. It's an Omnitrix specifically designed to repair dimensional damage, Blukik translated simply. Like a specialized tool rather than the multi-purpose original. Max nodded thoughtfully. And the transformation Ben used at the industrial facility. Unprecedented, Dryba declared with undisguised scientific excitement. The Riftwalker 4M appears capable of manipulating dimensional energy directly, essentially allowing Ben to rewrite the rules of space between realities. Ben finally lowered his arm as the scanner completed its cycle. So it's giving me exactly what we need to counter Kaiser's plan. That can't be coincidence. Indeed not, came a new voice from the doorway. Hope Ledger stood there, having exchanged her casual attire for her more formal magical garb. A purple tunic with silver runes embroidered along its edges, fitted pants designed for mobility, and a cape that seemed to shimmer between shades of violet as it caught the light. The outfit managed to balance practical functionality with the ceremonial elements that enhanced certain types of spellcasting. She entered the laboratory with the confidence of someone who had earned her place despite complicated history. Several junior plumbers visibly tensed at her arrival. Charmcaster's reputation lingered even years after her reformation. The arrival of the Flame Omnitrix precisely when Kaiser initiates the convergence suggests intervention by whoever created it, Hope continued, setting a worn leather tome on the examination table. I've been researching in the archives. There are references to an ancient order called the Dimensional Architects who foresaw the possibility of forced convergence. Max examined the book with interest. I've never heard of them. Few have, Hope confirmed. They existed between realities, monitoring the boundaries and maintaining cosmic balance. According to these texts, they foresaw that someone might MPT to manipulate the convergence for personal gain, so they created tools to counter such attempts. Like the Flame Omnitrix, Ben concluded, looking down at the device on his wrist with new appreciation. Hope nodded. Exactly. The texts mention a flame to fight the darkness between worlds. I believe they created the Flame Omnitrix as the ultimate countermeasure, designed to find a worthy wielder when the threat emerged. Julie folded her arms, skepticism evident in her posture. Convenient timing, almost like someone planned this entire scenario. That possibility cannot be dismissed. A melodic voice interjected from the lab's communication panel. The screen activated to reveal Mayax, Azimuth's chimera sui generis assistant and now a respected scientist in her own right. But our immediate concern must be Kaiser's accelerated timeline. Max approached the screen. Mayax, thank you for joining us. What's Galvan Prime's assessment? The tall, tentacled alien adjusted something off-screen before responding. Our dimensional sensors detected the breach immediately. Analysis confirms this is not a natural phenomenon. The convergence is being artificially stimulated at precisely calculated points. The Nexus locations, Ben supplied. We've neutralized one, but there are 4 more. Mayax nodded. Correct. And our models suggest that with each passing hour, the remaining Nexus points grow more unstable. The one you neutralized was merely the catalyst. The others are now feeding each other's energy in an exponential pattern. The implications settled heavily on the room. Julie was the first to speak. Her tactical mind already calculating response options. How long do we have? Difficult to determine precisely, Mayax admitted. But based on current acceleration rates, all Nexus points must be neutralized within 36 hours, or the convergence will become self-sustaining. That's our deadline then, Max decided, turning to address the room. We need 4 teams, 1 for each remaining Nexus point. Ben shook his head. That won't work, Grandpa. The Flame Omnitrix is the only thing that successfully reversed the amplifier. We need to hit each point sequentially. And I need to be at each one. Ben's right, Hope confirmed. The magical signatures are too complex for conventional containment. We need the Flame Omnitrix's unique capabilities. Max frowned, recognizing the strategic problem. 4 locations in 36 hours, with unknown resistance at each site. That's cutting it close. Then we prioritize, Julie suggested, professional instincts taking over. Mayax, which Nexus point is reaching critical levels fastest? The Galvan scientist consulted data off-screen. The abandoned mining complex shows the most rapid energy accumulation. After that, the underwater formation near Bellwood Bay, followed by the mountain observatory, with the desert site showing the slowest progression. That settles our order of operations, Julie concluded. We hit the mining complex immediately, then proceed through the sequence as quickly as possible. Ben nodded in agreement, already standing to prepare for departure. We should move now. Kaiser's people will have reinforced security at the remaining sites after our intervention at the industrial facility. I'm coming with you, Hope stated matter-of-factly. The magical components of these amplifiers require my expertise. Julie checked her energy pistol with practiced efficiency. I'll coordinate tactical approach. We should bring additional firepower this time. Those Apoplexians weren't playing around. Max studied the three of them thoughtfully before nodding. Approved. I'll assign Rook to provide backup support. His proto-tool versatility could prove useful. Hi's expression softened slightly as he looked at Ben. Be careful out there. We still don't fully understand what the Flame Omnitrix might do to you with prolonged use. Ben offered his grandfather a reassuring smile. When am I not careful? Quote. The question earned a synchronized eye roll from everyone in the room, including Mayax on the screen. We'll depart in 15 minutes, Julie announced, already moving toward the door. I need to brief Rook and prepare the tactical shuttle. As the others dispersed to make preparations, Ben found himself momentarily alone with Hope. The sorceress was studying the Flame Omnitrix with undisguised interest, her fingers hovering just above its surface without making contact. You're adapting to it remarkably quickly, she observed. Most magical artifacts of this caliber would take weeks or months to form a proper bond with their wielder. Ben shrugged, the gesture casual despite the seriousness of their situation. I've had practice. This is technically the third Omnitrix I've used, not counting alternate versions from parallel timelines. Hope's violet eyes met his, a hint of amusement softening her typically guarded expression. Only you could be so nonchalant about wielding devices that reshape reality, Tennyson. Occupational hazard, Ben replied with a ghost of his youthful grin. After the first dozen world-ending scenarios, you develop a certain perspective. The moment of levity faded as Hope's expression grew more serious. This is different, though. The Flame Omnitrix isn't just giving you new forms, it's connecting you to the fundamental forces of reality itself. That kind of power. She hesitated, searching for the right words. It changes people, Ben. I've seen what happens when someone connects too deeply with primal magical forces. Ben recognized the concern behind her warning. Hope's own journey from villain to ally had been marked by her struggles with the corrupting influence of immense magical power. I appreciate the warning, he said sincerely. I'll be careful. Hope held his gaze a moment longer before nodding. See that you are. We have enough problems without adding, corrupted Ben Tennyson, to the list. With that, she turned and exited the laboratory, leaving Ben to contemplate the device on his wrist with newfound wariness. The Flame Omnitrix pulsed once, as if acknowledging his concerns, before settling back into its steady glow. The tactical shuttle cut through the night sky with minimal illumination, its stealth systems rendering it nearly invisible against the darkness. Inside, the team made final preparations as Julie piloted them toward the abandoned mining complex 15 miles outside Bellwood's city limits. Approach vector calculated to minimize detection, Julie reported from the pilot's seat. Her hands moving with practiced efficiency across the controls. ETA 7 minutes. In the shuttle's main compartment, Ben studied the holographic display showing their target. The mining complex had been shut down decades earlier when the veins of valuable minerals were exhausted, leaving behind a sprawling network of buildings and tunnel systems partially reclaimed by nature. The nexus point is located in the main shaft, he noted, indicating a pulsing marker on the display. According to the Flame Omnitrix's scan, the amplifier has already reached 70% capacity. Beside him, Hope traced magical symbols in the air, creating a miniature model of energy flows around the target site. The dimensional thinning is more advanced than at the industrial facility. We're going to encounter more severe reality distortions. Rook Blanco, who had joined them as tactical support, examined the display with characteristic thoroughness. The Revo, Nagander's feline features remained composed as he absorbed the information. In the years since their initial partnership, Rook had advanced to become one of the Plumber's most respected field commanders. His analytical mind and combat prowess making him invaluable during complex operations. The terrain offers multiple approach vectors, Rook observed, manipulating the hologram to highlight potential entry points. However, the energy distortions will likely be most concentrated around the main entrance and ventilation shafts. So we need an alternative entry point, Julie concluded, setting the shuttle's autopilot before joining them at the display. What about the emergency evacuation tunnel? According to the old mining records, it connects to the main shaft from the eastern ridge. Hope's magical model adjusted, flowing around the location Julie had indicated. The dimensional distortion is minimal there. Good thinking. Ben felt a familiar warmth at Julie's tactical acumen. During their years together, he had often relied on her practical problem solving to complement his more improvisational approach. Some skills never faded, apparently. Then that's our insertion point, Ben decided. Rook, you and Julie secure our exit path. Hope and I will proceed to the nexus point and neutralize the amplifier. Rook nodded, retrieving his proto-tool from its position on his back. The multifunctional weapon had seen numerous upgrades over the years, incorporating both technological and magical enhancements. I have configured the proto-tool with an antiphase modulator, he explained. It should temporarily stabilize any dimensional anomalies we encounter, creating safe passage for short periods. And I've prepared containment charms, Hope added, displaying small, purple crystals that hummed with magical energy. They won't stop the amplifier, but they can slow dimensional bleeding if things get out of hand. Ben checked the flame Omnitrix, which pulsed with steady determination on his wrist. Looks like we're as prepared as we can be. Julie, take us in. Returning to the controls, Julie guided the shuttle toward the eastern ridge, setting down in a small L clearing surrounded by twisted pine trees. The dimensional rift visible in the sky above cast an eerie crimson glow across the landscape, creating long shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. Dimensional thinning is affecting local physics, Hope observed as they disembarked. Nothing too dangerous yet, but stay alert for sudden changes. Ben took point, the flame Omnitrix, providing subtle guidance through occasional pulses of warmth against his skin. The device seemed almost alive, responding to the nearby nexus point like a compass needle drawn to magnetic north. EY located the emergency tunnel entrance concealed behind overgrown vegetation. The heavy metal door had long since rusted shut, its locking mechanism fused by decades of exposure to the elements. Allow me, Rook said, configuring his proto-tool into cutting mode. The advanced device made short work of the rusted hinges, allowing them to carefully remove the door with minimal noise. The tunnel beyond was dark and musty, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying support timbers. Hope summoned a sphere of magical light that illuminated their path without the harshness of conventional lighting. The main shaft should be half a mile ahead, Julie noted, consulting the mapped overlay on her tactical display. Motion sensors aren't picking up any movement, but dimensional interference could be affecting readings. They proceeded cautiously, each alert for signs of danger. Ben found himself repeatedly glancing at his companions, struck by the strange circumstances that had brought them together. Julie, whose relationship with him had evolved from high school romance to respectful professional distance. Hope, whose journey from enemy to ally had been marked by reluctant cooperation and gradual trust, and Rook, whose partnership had grown into one of Ben's most valued friendships. As they approached a junction in the tunnel, Hope suddenly raised her hand for them to stop. Wait, something's wrong with the dimensional stability here. Before anyone could respond, the air before them rippled like heat waves above hot asphalt. The tunnel wavered, its solid walls momentarily transparent, showing glimpses of other places, alien landscapes, swirling voids, and geometric patterns that hurt the eyes. Dimensional pocket forming, Hope warned, her hands already weaving protective magic. We need to. Her warning came too late as the reality fluctuation expanded rapidly, enveloping them in a sphere of distorted space-time. The mining tunnel disappeared, replaced by a kaleidoscopic swirl of fragmentary realities bleeding into one another. Ben felt the flame Omnitrix pulse urgently against his wrist, responding to the dimensional disruption. Acting on instinct rather than conscious decision, he activated the transformation, feeling the now familiar energy flow through him as he took the form of Riftwalker once again. The transformation stabilized the immediate area around them, creating a bubble of coherent reality within the chaos. Riftwalker could perceive the complex dimensional currents flowing around them, understanding intuitively that they had stumbled into a side effect of the amplifier's activity. Everyone okay? He asked, his voice resonating with multiple harmonics. Julie had drawn her weapon instinctively, though it would likely prove useless against a dimensional anomaly. Define. Okay. We're floating in some kind of reality bubble between dimensions. Fascinating, Rook commented, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding tactical concerns. We appear to be experiencing multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Hope's magical shields had merged with Riftwalker's stabilizing influence, creating a sustainable haven within the fluctuation. This isn't just a random effect, she observed, studying the patterns of energy around them. It's a deliberate defense mechanism, the amplifier sensing our approach and creating a dimensional trap. Riftwalker extended his awareness outward, feeling the structure of the distortion. You're right, this is designed to capture intruders between realities. If I hadn't transformed, he left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was clear. Without the flame Omnitrix's capabilities, they would have been lost between dimensions, their component atoms scattered across multiple realities. Can you get us out? Julie asked, practical as always even in extraordinary circumstances. Riftwalker studied the dimensional currents, identifying patterns and weaknesses. I think so. The distortion has a frequency, a pulse rate. If I synchronize with it, I should be able to guide us back to our reality. Do it, Hope encouraged, reinforcing her magical shields. I can maintain our integrity for about 5 minutes before my reserves deplete. With a nod, Riftwalker extended his hands, energy flowing from his fingertips to interact with the dimensional currents surrounding them. The process required intense concentration, identifying their home reality among countless alternatives, then creating a path back through the dimensional interference. As he worked, flickering images appeared around them, glimpses of other possibilities, other timelines. In one, Ben saw himself in plumber leadership, older and more authoritative than he had ever imagined becoming. In another, he glimpsed Hope as she might have been without the trauma that led her to darkness, confidently teaching magic to young students. In yet another, Julie stood beside him, both wearing matte Ching wedding bands as they faced some unseen challenge together. Dimensional bleed, Hope explained, noticing their reactions to the images. We're seeing alternative timelines, paths not taken. Focus on our reality, Riftwalker instructed, feeling the correct frequency amidst the chaos. I've almost got it. With a final surge of effort, he aligned his energy with the specific pattern of their home dimension. The chaotic swirl around them began to organize, fragments of the mining tunnel becoming visible through the interference. Brace yourselves, he warned as he completed the realignment. Reality snapped back into place with disorienting suddenness. The group found themselves once again in the mining tunnel, though several hundred yards farther along than their original position. The dimensional distortion had relocated them closer to the main shaft, and the nexus point. Riftwalker reverted to human form as the transformation timed out, the flame Omnitrix needing to RGE after the intensive dimensional manipulation. Ben staggered slightly, feeling the mental fatigue that accompanied complex transformations. You all right? Julie asked, steadying him with a hand on his shoulder. Yeah, Ben assured her. Straightening. Just takes a lot out of me. The Riftwalker form interfaces directly with my consciousness in ways the other transformations don't. Hope was already scanning their surroundings. Her magical senses alert for further disturbances. The amplifier knows we're here now. That trap was just the first line of defense. Then we should expect resistance, Rook concluded, configuring his proto-tool to combat mode. Both conventional and dimensional. They continued forward with heightened caution, the tunnel gradually widening as they approached the main mining shaft. The effects of dimensional thinning became increasingly apparent. Patches of wall that flickered between solid rock and transparent membrane, gravity that subtly shifted direction in certain areas, and occasional echoes of sounds that hadn't occurred yet. The tunnel finally opened into the main shaft, an enormous vertical cavity where mining operations had once extracted valuable minerals from Bellwood's underground. Metal catwalks and platforms clung to the walls at various levels, connected by stairs and now inoperative elevator systems. At the bottom of the shaft, approximately 200 feet below their position, pulsed the unmistakable glow of an amplifier device identical to the one they had neutralized at the industrial facility. There it is, Ben whispered, crouching behind a rusted equipment crate for cover. But something's different about this one. The amplifier at the shaft bottom was surrounded by a swirling barrier of energy, not Hope's purple magic or the flame Omnitrix's crimson gold, but a sickly green that seemed to devour light rather than emit it. Void energy, Hope identified, her expression grim. Kaiser's specialty, magic drawn from the spaces between dimensions. Extremely dangerous and highly unstable. Julie surveyed the shaft through specialized tactical goggles. I count 8 hostiles. 4 appear to be the same environ. Mental suited figures from the industrial facility, 2 apoplexians, and... She paused, adjusting her goggles settings. I can't get a clear reading on the other 2. They're giving off unusual energy signatures. Rook's enhanced vision confirmed Julie's assessment. The unidentified entities appear partially phase-shifted, not fully present in our reality. Dimensional enforcers, Hope suggested. Kaiser was known for binding entities from the void to serve him. They're extremely dangerous, capable of shifting between realities to avoid attacks. Ben checked the flame Omnitrix, which had recharged to approximately half capacity. We need a plan. The Riftwalker form should be able to neutralize the amplifier like before, but I'll need time and close proximity. Classic approach then, Julie decided. Diversionary action to draw attention while you reach the objective. Hope nodded in agreement. Rook and Julie create the distraction. I'll provide magical cover for Ben to reach the amplifier. Just like old times, Ben commented with a hint of his youthful enthusiasm. Except usually Kevin would be complaining about the plan right about now. The brief moment of nostalgia was interrupted as Rook raised a warning hand. Movement below. They appear to be initiating some kind of procedure with the amplifier. Looking down, they saw one of the environmental suited figures adjusting controls on the device. The amplifier's pulsing intensified, sending waves of energy upward through the shaft toward the dimensional rift visible through the open ceiling far above. They're accelerating the process, Hope realized. They must know we've been neutralizing the nexus points. No more time for planning, Ben decided. We go now. Without waiting for further discussion, he activated the flame Omnitrix. The device cycled through available transformations before settling on one Ben recognized from his original roster, the 4-armed, powerful form of 4 arms, but with a significant difference. This version glowed with inner fire, crimson energy patterns flowing across its muscular red skin like living circuitry. Whoa, the transformed Ben exclaimed, examining his modified form. Flame 4 arms. The power feels different. Hope quickly analyzed the transformation. The flame Omnitrix is enhancing your standard transformations with dimensional energy manipulation capabilities. You should have your normal strength plus some ability to affect dimensional boundaries. The newly dubbed Flame 4 arms nodded, feeling the enhanced power coursing through his body. Let's test it out. Without further warning, he grabbed a nearby piece of mining equipment and hurled it with tremendous force toward the assembled figures below. The projectile blazed with crimson energy as it flew, creating a minor dimensional disruption in its wake. The reaction was immediate. The environmental suited figures scattered for cover while the apoplexians roared challenges upward. Most concerning, the phase-shifted entities immediately disappeared from normal visibility, becoming detectable only as ripples in the air as they began ascending toward the intruder's position. Diversionary action successful, Rook observed dryly, already taking aim with his proto-tool. Perhaps a little warning next time, Ben. Where's the fun in that? Flame 4 arms replied, with a grin that showed enhanced canines. Julie, Rook, keep the apoplexians busy. Hope, watch for those phase-shifted things. I'm going for the amplifier. With that, he leapt from their position, powerful legs launching him in a controlled descent toward the shaft bottom. Julie and Rook immediately provided covering fire, their energy weapons forcing the environmental suited figures to remain in cover rather than target Ben's descending form. Hope's hands traced complex patterns in the air, her eyes glowing with magical energy as she cast a revelation spell. The phase-shifted entities are approaching from the eastern wall. She warned, I can make them visible, but only temporarily. Her spell manifested as a wave of purple energy that washed across the mining shaft. Where it passed, the phase-shifted entities became briefly visible, humanoid figures composed of swirling darkness, their forms constantly shifting between states of matter. Rook immediately adjusted his aim, firing precision shots that passed through the partially materialized entities with minimal effect. Conventional weapons appear ineffective. They exist between states, Hope explained, preparing another spell. Try modulating your weapon's energy frequency. As Rook adjusted his proto-tool, Julie focused her fire on the apoplexians, who had begun ascending the metal catwalks toward their position. Precise shots struck key structural points, causing sections of the aged walkways to collapse and forcing the aliens to find alternative routes. Meanwhile, Flame Four Arms had reached the shaft bottom, landing with enough force to crater the stone floor. The environmental suited figures immediately converged on his position, wielding energy weapons that fired sickly green beams similar to the barrier surrounding the amplifier. Always the hard way, Flame Four Arms sighed, cracking his knuckles before engaging the attackers. The first suited figure fired directly at him, but Flame 4A. RMS discovered his enhanced form could manipulate the dimensional properties of the energy beam. With a precise motion, he caught the beam in one hand, the energy swirling around his fist rather than damaging him. That's new, he observed before redirecting the energy back at his attacker, sending the suited figure flying into a mining cart. Two more attackers approached from different angles, coordinating their fire to limit his maneuverability. Flame Four Arms responded by slamming all four fists into the ground, creating a dimensional shockwave that distorted gravity in a localized area. The suited figures suddenly found themselves floating helplessly, their shots going wild as they lost orientation. Advancing toward the amplifier, Flame Four Arms encountered the void energy barrier. A swirling wall of green power that separated him from his objective. He reached out cautiously, testing its resistance with one hand. The barrier reacted violently, sending painful feedback through his arm. Hope, he called upward. I need help with this barrier. Above, Hope was maintaining a defensive position with Julie and Rook, her magic creating shields against the phase-shifted entity. i.e. that Rook's reconfigured proto-tool was now successfully damaging. At Ben's call, she glanced downward, quickly assessing the situation. It's void energy, she shouted back. You need to match its frequency but invert the phase. The Flame Omnitrix should be able to guide you. Flame Four Arms turned his attention to the Flame Omnitrix symbol on his chest, mentally reaching for the knowledge Hope suggested would be there. To his surprise, he could sense the frequency pattern of the barrier, a complex mathematical structure expressed in energy rather than numbers. Following instinct, he laced all four hands against the barrier, focusing on inverting the energy pattern. The Flame Omnitrix pulsed in response, feeding him the necessary knowledge to manipulate dimensional energy even in this transformation. Gradually, the barrier began to respond, its swirling pattern slowing as Flame Four Arms imposed a countering frequency. With a final push of effort, he inverted the phase completely, causing the barrier to collapse in on itself and dissipate. The amplifier now stood exposed, its pulsing intensifying as if sensing the threat to its operation. As Flame Four Arms approached, fourth environmental suited figure stepped between him and the device, removing their helmet to reveal a face that made the transformed hero pause in shock. Impossible, Flame Four Arms breathed, staring at what appeared to be a mirror image of his human form, Ben Tennyson, but with eyes that glowed an unnatural green and skin that seemed slightly translucent. Not impossible, the doppelganger replied, its voice a distorted echo of Ben's own. Inevitable, I am what you become when the convergence completes, a being existing across all realities simultaneously. Flame Four Arms maintained his combat stance, processing this new development. Let me guess, Kaiser showed you this inevitable future. The doppelganger smiled unnaturally. Kaiser opened my eyes to the possibilities. When dimensions converge, those who control the process transcend normal existence. You're fighting to prevent your own ascension, Ben. Looks more like degradation from where I'm standing, Flame Four Arms countered. Noticing how the doppelganger's form occasionally glitched, showing glimpses of a skeletal structure that wasn't entirely human. What did he do to you? Freed me from the limitations of single-dimensional existence. The doppelganger declared, its hands beginning to glow with the same sickly green energy as the void barrier. A gift he offers to all who serve him. Without further warning, the doppelganger attacked, firing beams of void energy that Flame Four Arms barely dodged. Unlike the suited figure's weapons, these beams left trails of distorted reality in their wake, temporarily erasing portions of the mining shaft where they struck. Ben, Julie's voice called from above. The amplifier is reaching critical levels. Whatever you're going to do, do it now. Flame Four Arms glanced at the amplifier, which was indeed pulsing more rapidly, then back at his doppelganger. Love to chat about my apparently horrible future, but I've got a reality to save. He charged forward, using his enhanced strength and speed to close the distance before the doppelganger could fire again. The four-arm transformation gave him a significant advantage in close combat, allowing him to strike from multiple angles simultaneously. The doppelganger proved surprisingly resilient, its partially phase-shifted nature allowing it to avoid some impacts entirely. It fought with a style identical to Ben's own, logical, given its origins, but with an added dimensional component that made its movements unpredictable. You can't win against yourself, the doppelganger taunted, facing through what should have been a devastating uppercut. I know every move you'll make before you make it. Flame Four Arms grinned, an expression particularly intimidating on his transformed face. Then you should know I never fight fair. Quote. With that, he slammed all four fists into the ground again, creating another dimensional shockwave, but this time directed not at his opponent but at the mining shaft's structural supports. The already weakened columns cracked under the dimensional stress, sending debris raining down directly onto the doppelganger's position. While his opponent was momentarily distracted by the falling debris, Flame Four Arms lunged for the amplifier. Placing his hands on the device just as he had at the industrial facility, he began the process of inverting its energy flow. The doppelganger recovered quickly, firing a beam of void energy directly at Flame Four Arms' exposed back. The attack would have connected if not for a timely intervention, a shield of purple energy materializing to deflect the beam. Hope had descended to the shaft bottom, her magic creating a protective barrier around Ben while he worked. Hurry, she urged, maintaining the shield again. Saint the doppelganger's increasingly frantic attacks. I can't hold this forever. Above them, Julie and Rook continued to battle the apoplexians and phase-shifted entities, preventing them from interfering with the critical task below. The mining shaft had become a chaotic battlefield, with energy beams, magical blasts, and dimensional distortions filling the space. Flame Four Arms focused entirely on the amplifier, feeling the resistance as he attempted to reverse its function. This device fought harder than the previous one, its programming more aggressive and determined. It's not working the same way, he grunted, struggling against the amplifier's resistance. This one has some kind of protection against inversion. Hope maintained her shield while analyzing the amplifier with her magical senses. It's adapted based on what happened at the industrial facility. We need a different approach. The doppelganger laughed, the sound disturbingly inhuman despite coming from a face identical to Ben's. Kaiser anticipated your interference. Each amplifier is unique. What worked once will never work again. Flame Four Arms glanced at the flame Omnitrix symbol on his chest, which pulsed with increasing urgency. Then we improvise. Instead of trying to invert the energy flow as before, he began to manipulate the dimensional frequencies themselves, using his enhanced forms ability ties to create a feedback loop within the amplifier. The device began to vibrate as conflicting energy patterns formed within its core. What are you doing? The doppelganger demanded, its attacks owing more desperate as it sensed the threat to its mission. Changing the rules, Flame Four Arms replied through gritted teeth, maintaining his concentration despite the strain. The feedback loop intensified, causing the amplifier to emit a high-pitched whine as its system struggled to compensate. Above them, the energy beam connecting to the dimensional rift began to fluctuate, its steady stream becoming erratic. It's working, Hope exclaimed, reinforcing her shield as the doppelganger launched a particularly powerful attack. The connection to the rift is destabilizing. The doppelganger abandoned its attacks on the shield, instead lunging directly for Flame Four Arms in a last desperate attempt to stop the process. It passed partially through Hope's magical barrier, its phase-shifted nature allowing limited penetration. You doom us all, it cried, hands reaching for Flame Four Arms' throat. Without breaking his concentration on the amplifier, Flame Four Arms lashed out with one arm, catching the doppelganger by its partially solid form. No, he corrected, I'm saving us all, including whatever version of me you used to be. With his free hand, he touched the flame Omnitrix symbol on his chest, channeling dimensional energy directly into the doppelganger. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The distorted Ben thing convulsed as concentrated reality energy forced its unstable form to solidify. What are you doing to me? It gasped, its voice becoming more human as its form stabilized. Reminding you what it means to exist in one reality, Flame Forearms answered. Maintaining the energy flow while simultaneously completing the feedback loop in the amplifier. The doppelganger's glowing green eyes gradually faded to normal human coloration, claret. Why returning to them as the void energy influence receded? For a brief moment, true recognition flashed across his face. Thank. The word came out as barely a whisper before the now fully materialized doppelganger collapsed unconscious. The amplifier had reached critical instability, its components glowing white-hot as the feedback loop approached destructive levels. Hope reinforced her shield around them as Flame Forearms completed the final adjustments to the energy pattern. Everyone clear the shaft, he shouted upward. This one's going to blow rather than invert. Julie and Rook, having successfully neutralized the remaining threats, began a rapid retreat up the mining shaft toward the emergency tunnel. Hope maintained her position, shield still protecting Ben as he finished his work. We need to move, she urged, eyeing the increasingly unstable amplifier. Like right now. Flame Forearms nodded, grabbing the unconscious doppelganger and slinging him over one shoulder. Let's go. Together, they raced toward the shaft wall where a service ladder offered the fastest route upward. Hope ascended first, magical energy boosting her speed, while Flame Forearms followed with his burden. Powerful arms making quick work of the climb despite the extra weight. They had barely reached the level of the emergency tunnel when the amplifier finally succumbed to the feedback loop. Unlike the controlled inversion at the industrial facility, this resulted in a catastrophic energy release, a shockwave of dimensional energy that raced outward from the device. Brace, Hope shouted, throwing up the strongest shield she could muster as the shockwave hit. The shield held, but the force still sent them tumbling into the emergency tunnel where Julie and Rook waited. The entire mining complex shuddered as dimensional energy tore through its structure, reality itself seeming to scream in protest. Move, Julie ordered, already running toward the exit. The whole place is coming down. They raced through the tunnel, the unconscious doppelganger now carried between Flame Forearms and Rook. Behind them, the mining shaft collapsed as dimensional energy erased portions of its structure from reality itself. They burst from the emergency exit just as the dimensional shockwave reached its peak. A column of golden energy erupted from the center of the mining complex, shooting skyward to connect with the dimensional rift above. Where the energy touched the rift, reality began to restabilize, the tear slowly closing as the nexus point was neutralized, messily but effectively. The flame Omnitrix timed out as they reached the shuttle, returning Ben to human form. He collapsed against the hull, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. That, he panted, was way more intense than the first one. Julie was already powering up the shuttle's engines while Rook secured the unconscious doppelganger in a containment field designed for dimensionally unstable entities. 2 down, 3 to go, Hope noted, looking no less drained than Ben as she leaned against the shuttle's frame. And each one will likely be harder than the last. Ben nodded grimly, glancing at the secured doppelganger. Kaiser's playing with forces he can't control. That could have been me. But it wasn't, Julie pointed out, her practical nature grounding the conversation. And we have a limited window to make sure it never happens to anyone else either. We need to get back to headquarters and plan our approach to the underwater nexus point. As they boarded the shuttle, Ben found himself studying Julie with newfound appreciation. Her calm efficiency under pressure, her tactical mind, her ability to focus on solutions rather than problems, these were qualities he had always admired but perhaps never fully appreciated during their relationship years ago. The shuttle lifted off as the mining complex continued its partial collapse behind them, dimensional energy gradually dissipating as the nexus point neutralized completely. In the sky above, the dimensional rift had noticeably shrunk, though it remained an ominous presence dominating the horizon. The doppelganger, Ben said quietly as they gained altitude. He said something about ascension through the convergence. What do you think Kaiser really wants? Hope considered the question, her expression troubled. The texts mentioned that a full convergence would release enough energy to essentially rewrite reality itself. If Kaiser controls that process, he could reshape everything according to his vision, Julie finished. The implications dawning on her. Total control over all dimensions. But what does that mean for everyone else? Ben pressed. The doppelganger was clearly wrong. Damaged somehow. Hope's voice grew somber. Most likely, Kaiser intends to preserve only those he deems worthy, those who serve him. Everyone else would be rewritten into whatever forms best serve his new reality. The weight of that possibility settled heavily in the shuttle cabin. Billions of lives across countless dimensions, all subject to the whims of a single-dimensional warlord. Then we make absolutely sure that doesn't happen, Ben stated, determination overriding his exhaustion. No matter what it takes. As the shuttle soared back toward Plumber headquarters, Ben found himself looking at the unconscious doppelganger, a grim reminder of potential futures they were fighting to prevent. Whatever Kaiser had done to create this twisted version of himself, Ben was now more determined than ever to stop the dimensional warlord's plans. The flame Omnitrix pulsed gently on his wrist, as if in agreement. Plumber medical facilities were typically equipped to handle a wide range of alien physiologies and unusual conditions. However, the doppelganger presented challenges beyond standard protocols. The being existed in a semi-stable state, occasionally phasing between solid matter and energy patterns that defied conventional medical equipment. Ben watched through an observation window as specialists attempted to stabilize the doppelganger's condition. Despite the physical resemblance, seeing this twisted version of himself lying on a medical platform stirred complex emotions. Was this truly a future version of himself? An alternate timeline variant, or something Kaiser had created as psychological warfare? The dimensional contamination is severe, Blukik commented, reviewing data on a nearby monitor. His molecular structure shows signs of exposure to at least 7 different dimensional frequencies. Dryba nodded in agreement, adding, essentially, he exists partially in multiple realities simultaneously. The unstable overlapping is causing progressive degradation of his primary form. Can you help him? Ben asked, unable to look away from the doppelganger's face, but haunted by experiences Ben couldn't imagine. Stabilization is possible, Blukik replied with unusual seriousness. Reversal of the dimensional contamination is less certain. A presence beside him drew Ben's attention away from the medical proceedings. Julie stood there, Fr. Ashley changed into a clean uniform after the mining complex battle, her expression a carefully maintained professional mask that nonetheless couldn't quite hide her concern. Thought I'd find you here, she said quietly. The briefing starts in 10 minutes. Magister Tennyson wants full details on what happened at the mining complex. Ben nodded but didn't immediately move. He called me, inevitable, Julie. Said I was fighting to prevent my own ascension. Julie studied the doppelganger through the observation window, her analytical mind processing implications. Psychological manipulation. Kaiser's trying to make you doubt yourself. Maybe, Ben conceded, but what if there's some truth to it? What if the flame Omnitrix is changing me in ways I don't understand yet? Julie turned to face him directly, her expression softening slightly. Ben, I've known you for over 15 years. You've wielded some of the most powerful devices in the universe, faced temptations that would corrupt anyone else. And you've always remained you. Her confidence in him was comforting, though Ben couldn't help noticing the careful distance she maintained, physically and emotionally, despite the personal nature of their conversation. The professional boundaries she had established after their relationship ended remained firmly in place, even in moments like this. You always did see the best in me, he observed with a hint of his usual smile. Even when I was being an idiot. Especially then, she replied, a brief flash of their old rapport breaking through her professional demeanor. Someone had to. The moment passed quickly as she checked her communicator. We should head to the briefing. Hope has been researching the underwater nexus point, and she thinks she's found something important. As they walked through the headquarters corridors, Ben found himself reflecting on their complicated history. They had been so young when they first met, he barely 16, she a year older. Both with their entire lives ahead of them. Their relationship had survived alien invasions, dimensional threats, and Ben's growing celebrity status, only to eventually falter under the pressures of their diverging careers and Ben's inability to fully commit to a life beyond being a hero. Do you ever think about how things might have been different? He asked suddenly, the words escaping before he could reconsider them. Julie glanced at him. knowing exactly what he meant without requiring clarification. Sometimes, she admitted after a brief hesitation. But we both made choices that led us here. I don't regret mine. The unspoken question hung between them. Did he regret his? Before Ben could respond, they reached the briefing room where Magister Tennyson, Rook, Hope, and Sever, Al senior plumbers were already assembled. The moment for personal reflection passed, replaced by the urgent demands of their current crisis. Ben, Julie, Max greeted them with a nod. Hope was just explaining what she's discovered about the underwater nexus point. Hope stood beside a holographic display showing Bellwood Bay and the underwater formations beneath its surface. She had changed Fr. Own her battle-worn attire into fresh magical robes, though the lingering fatigue from their earlier confrontation remained visible in the slight tension around her eyes. The underwater nexus point is located within an ancient structure beneath Bellwood Bay, she explained, highlighting a section of the seafloor approximately 2 miles offshore. According to historical records, the structure pre-dates human settlement in the region by several thousand years. The hologram zoomed in, revealing a complex of stone buildings partially buried in sediment and coral growth. At the center, a distinct T-pyramid-like structure pulsed with energy readings that matched the signature of Kaiser's amplifiers. I believe this was originally a monitoring station established by the Dimensional Architects, Hope continued. A place where they could observe and maintain the natural balance between realities. And now Kaiser has repurposed it to do exactly the opposite, Ben concluded, studying the holographic structure. What kind of resistance should we expect? Hope adjusted the display to show energy readings around the underwater complex. The dimensional thinning has progressed further than at the previous locations. Water and air are beginning to interchange randomly. Essentially, pockets of breathable atmosphere are forming underwater while sections of the surface above are experiencing flooding with no apparent source. That will complicate our approach, Rook observed. Standard underwater equipment may prove unreliable in such conditions. Especially since we can assume Kaiser has stationed guards there as well. Julie added, likely with specialized capabilities for underwater combat. Ben checked the flame Omnitrix, which had fully recharged following the mining complex battle. I have several transformations that can handle underwater environments. The question is whether they'll be enhanced by the flame Omnitrix's modifications, like Forearms was. Max stepped forward, his experienced gaze assessing the tactical situation displayed in the hologram. This operation will require specialized support. I'm assigning Magister Patellidae to coordinate with you. His aquatic capabilities and knowledge of underwater combat will be valuable. When do we move out? Ben asked, already mentally preparing for the next confrontation. Dawn, Max replied firmly. If you need rest before attempting another nexus point neutralization. The dimensional distortions are getting more severe with each location, and fatigue leads to mistakes we can't afford. Ben want to protest. The urgency of their situation made rest seem like an indulgence they couldn't afford, but the wisdom in his grandfather's order was undeniable. They had already neutralized 2 nexus points in a single day, and the toll on all of them was evident. Dawn it is, he conceded. That gives us about 6 hours. Hope, can you prepare any additional magical protections for underwater operations in that time? The sorceress nodded. I have several enchantments that should help, though they'll require components from the archives. I'll need access. Granted, Max assured her. Julie, RK with Magister Patellidae on developing approach vectors that account for the dimensional distortions. Rook, coordinate with Technical Division on modifying equipment for extreme pressure variations. As the briefing concluded and the team dispersed to their assigned preparations, Ben found himself momentarily alone with his grandfather. Max's weathered face showed the concern he typically kept hidden during official briefings. How are you holding up? He asked quietly, placing a supportive hand on Ben's shoulder. Ben considered deflecting with his usual confidence but found himself answering honestly instead. It's intense, Grandpa. The flame Omnitrix. It's different from anything I've used before. The transformations connect to something deeper, something fundamental about reality itself. Max's expression remained thoughtful rather than alarmed. Azimuth always said the original Omnitrix was more than just a transformation device, it was a tool for understanding, for building bridges between different forms of life. Perhaps this variant serves a similar purpose on a deeper level. Maybe, Ben agreed, looking down at the device. But understanding dimensional energy is a lot more complicated than understanding what it's like to be a Pyronite or a Tetraman. True, Max acknowledged, but if anyone can handle that responsibility, it's you, Ben. You've grown into Arrow far beyond what I could have imagined when I first took that 10-year-old boy on a summer road trip. The simple pride in his grandfather's voice meant more to Ben than any official commendation. Max had been there from the beginning, had seen him at his most impulsive and irresponsible, had guided him through his darkest moments of doubt, and had always believed in the hero he could become. Thanks, Grandpa, Ben replied, the childhood term of affection feeling right despite his adult status. I won't let you down. Max smiled, squeezing his shoulder once before releasing it. You never have, even when you thought you did. Now get some rest. Tomorrow will test all of us. As Max departed, Ben found himself alone in the briefing room, the holographic display still showing the underwater nexus point that awaited them. 3 more locations to neutralize, each likely more dangerous than the last, with the fate of multiple realities hanging in the balance. Just another day in the life of Ben Tennyson. With a weary sigh, he deactivated the hologram and headed toward the quarters maintained for him at Plumber headquarters. 6 hours of rest before facing whatever challenges the underwater nexus point would bring. He needed to make them count. Sleep proved elusive despite Ben's exhaustion. His mind refused to quiet, cycling through the day's events and the implications of what they had learned. The flame Omnitrix occasionally pulsed gently on his wrist, as if sensing his restlessness. After 3 hours of futile attempts at rest, Ben gave up and made his way to the headquarters, observation deck. The circular chamber offered panoramic views of Bellwood and the dimensional rift still dominating the night sky. Though smaller after the neutralization of 2 nexus points, the rift remained an ominous presence, its swirling energies casting eerie patterns of light across the sleeping city. To his surprise, Ben found he wasn't alone in seeking the perspective offered by the observation deck. Hope stood at the far side of the chamber, her silhouette outlined against the view of the rift. She had dispensed with her formal magical attire, instead wearing simple civilian clothes, dark pants and a purple sweater that looked surprisingly ordinary for someone of her magical stature. She turned at the sound of the door, violet eyes reflecting the crimson light from outside. Couldn't sleep either. Too much on my mind, Ben admitted, moving to stand beside her at the viewing panel. The dimensional energy from the Riftwalker transformation takes a while to fully dissipate from my system. Hope nodded in understanding. Magical energy affects consciousness that way. It's why most sorcerers develop insomnia eventually. They stood in companionable silence for a few moments, watching the slow swirl of the dimensional rift. Their relationship had evolved dramatically over the years, from bitter enemies to reluctant allies to something approaching friendship. Though neither would have used that term directly. I've been meaning to ask, Ben said finally. Why did you agree to help so readily with all this? The plumbers aren't exactly your favorite organization. Hope considered the question before answering. Dimensional stability affects magical energy directly. If the convergence continues, Legerdemain would be one of the first realms to collapse completely. My homeland would cease to exist. So self-preservation, Ben concluded. Hope smiled slightly. That's certainly part of it. But also, she hesitated, seemingly uncomfortable with whatever she had been about to say. Also, Ben prompted gently. She sighed, turning to face him directly. Also because you asked, Tennyson. After everything that's happened between us over the years, you still came to me first when this crisis began. That matters. The admission clearly cost her something in terms of her carefully maintained emotional barriers. Hope's journey from Laney had been marked by isolation and distrust from those who remembered her actions as Charmcaster. Ben's willingness to see beyond that history had been one of the few genuine connections she had maintained. You've earned that trust, Ben told her sincerely, many times over. Hope's expression softened momentarily before her typical sardonic humor reasserted itself. Don't get sentimental on me now. We still have 3 more potentially catastrophic confrontations ahead of us. Ben laughed quietly, appreciating her deflection rather than taking offense. Speaking of which, what can you tell me about this underwater structure? You seem to recognize it specifically. Hope turned back to the viewing panel, her expression growing more serious. The histories in legerdemain mention even great anchors placed by the dimensional architects, structures that help maintain the boundaries between realities. The underwater complex matches the description of one such anchor. And Kaiser is using it to do the exact opposite. Ben concluded, converting a stabilizing force into a destabilizing one. Precisely, Hope confirmed. It's actually quite brilliant, in a horrifyingly destructive way. The anchors already channel dimensional energy, he's simply reversing their function. Ben considered this new information, its implications troubling. If these anchors exist to maintain dimensional boundaries, what happens if we destroy them rather than just neutralizing Kaiser's modifications? Potential localized dimensional collapse, Hope answered grimly. Which is why we need to be extremely careful tomorrow. The underwater anchor is likely the most sensitive of the 3 remaining nexus points. The conversation lapsed into silence again as both contemplated the challenges ahead. The dimensional rift pulsed above them, a constant reminder of the thinning barriers between realities. You and Julie, Hope said suddenly, breaking the quiet. There's still something there, isn't there? The unexpected question caught Ben off guard. That's complicated. Hope raised an eyebrow. I've mastered spells that rewrite the fundamental laws of reality. I think I can handle complicated. Despite himself, Ben smiled at her dry delivery. Fair point. Julie and I have history, a lot of it. Some good, some bad. We were young, and I wasn't exactly the most reliable boyfriend. The famous Ben Tennyson. Not perfect. I'm shocked, Hope teased, though without malice. Hard to believe, I know, Ben replied with self-deprecating humor. But saving the universe doesn't leave much time for regular date nights. Eventually, she needed someone who could be present in ways I couldn't. And now, Hope pressed, surprising herself with her interest in his answer. Ben shrugged, his gaze returning to the rift outside. Now we're professionals working together on a crisis. Whatever might have been there once, it's probably best left in the past. Hope studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. For someone who faces down cosmic threats without hesitation, you can be remarkably avoidant about personal matters, Tennyson. Says the woman who literally lived in a fortress designed to keep everyone out, Ben countered with a hint of a smile. Hope conceded the point with a graceful tilt of her head. Perhaps we're more alike than either of us would care to admit. The observation held more truth than Ben might have recognized years earlier. Both of them had, in their own ways, chosen paths that prioritized their unique responsibilities over conventional relationships. Both understood the weight of power that separated them from ordinary lives. We should try to get some rest, Ben suggested, noting the time on a nearby display. Only a couple of hours before we need to prepare for the underwater operation. Hope nodded in agreement, though neither made an immediate move to leave. The view of Bellwood beneath the dimensional rift held them. For a moment longer, a city sleeping peacefully, unaware of how thin the barriers protecting their reality had become. Do you ever wonder what it would be like? Hope asked quietly. A normal life without alien watches or magical responsibilities. Ben considered the question seriously. Sometimes. But then I remember that normal wouldn't have led me to help all the people I've been able to help. Wouldn't have let me see all the amazing things I've seen. He glanced at her. Wouldn't have led me to know people like you. The simple sincerity of his answer seemed to catch Hope by surprise. For a brief moment, her carefully maintained composure softened, revealing a glimpse of the person beneath the sorceress's identity. Careful, Tennyson, she replied, her tone lighter than her words. That almost sounded like a compliment. Quote, must be the dimensional energy affecting my judgment, he joked, finally turning away from the viewing panel. See you in a couple of hours, Hope. As he headed toward the exit, Hope's voice followed him, quiet but clear. Thank you, Ben, for seeing me as more than what I was. He paused in the doorway, looking back at her silhouette against the rift-lit sky. We're all more than our worst moments. Some of us just need reminding sometimes. With that, he departed, leaving Hope alone with her thoughts and the ever-present dimensional rift beyond the glass. The brief conversation had revealed layers to their relationship that neither had fully acknowledged before, a mutual respect and understanding born from years of evolving from enemies to allies. As Ben made his way back to his quarters, he found his mind settling enough that sleep might finally be possible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but somehow the weight of responsibility fell more manageable after his conversations with both Max and Hope. The flame Omnitrix pulsed once on his wrist, as if in agreement, before settling into its steady glow. Chapter 2 End. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.